Transfer of Diego Garcia from the United Kingdom to Mauritius is designed to protect a deep underground military base. Elon Musk shows a Vajra on his bedside table. Remote viewing experiments confirms claim of a US-Nordic spaceport under Green Mountain, Alabama. UFOs appearing near or over sensitive military installations or exercises lead to them being portrayed as a national security threat. 5 UFOs were filmed recently flying over Washington, D.C.'s no-fly zone. Could this be part of a UFO unveiling that many have been predicting? Vivek Ramaswamy, who will co-run DOGE, and Donald Trump Jr. have both expressed an interest in whistleblower claims of a secret UFO crash retrieval program. US Congresswoman asks whether the US president is being kept out of the loop on the UFO issue. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the November 30 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. It has been quite an eventful week. There has been some developments that are definitely worth diving into when it comes to the UFO extraterrestrial issue. So let's begin with this first tweet, or X. Still don't know how to refer to these things, tweets or X's, but this post is based on something that a representative, Jared Moskowitz from Florida, he is urging the 119th Congress, that's what's going to be convened in early January 2025, that will still be under the control of the Republicans, but by a very small margin, a smaller margin than the Republicans had previously, that Representative Moskowitz is urging the incoming 119th Congress to establish a Select UAP Committee. So currently the US Congress has had meetings in the House Oversight Committee, a subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee, where they have gone over whistleblower and expert data concerning UFOs. And so there is this call now to have a select committee that would be permanently convened to be discussing UFO issues. So this is, I think, a very welcome development, but we really need to emphasize here that they need to start inviting whistleblowers and contactees to future hearings, that these previous hearings that you had these different experts and people like Luis Elizondo, Admiral Tim Gallaudet, Mike Gold. That was the very last meeting that was held a couple of weeks ago. That really didn't move the disclosure process forward at all. And I think that what we're going to be seeing under the new Trump administration is that there's going to be disclosures, pretty major disclosures, because we need to keep in mind, according to this Israeli professor, Haim Eshed, that he was cited in an interview that came out in December of 2020. That was basically the kind of last month of the Trump administration in 2020. And he said that the Trump administration was in communication with the Galactic Federation and that Trump wanted to move forward with disclosure, and that the Federation said, no, humanity isn't ready yet because our technology is not yet sufficiently advanced to handle disclosure. Well, that was 4 years ago. Things have changed over the last 4 years. And I think that the Trump administration is going to move forward with the creation of this disclosure, of making people aware of what's happening on the UFOs. And Congress has to catch up, has to get on top of that issue. And it needs to be more than just interviewing experts. Similarly, you had the Senate Armed Services Committee, that had a hearing where just one witness, that was Dr. John Kozlowski, who is the current director of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or the ARROW office, and he just really came up with this bizarre statement that there is no evidence of extraterrestrial life that they have been able to gather in ARROW, but at the same time acknowledges that there are approximately 190 UFO cases that cannot be resolved. So how can you say there's no evidence of extraterrestrial life when you don't know 190 cases of UFOs, what they are? It's just like, it's really bizarre. But anyway, I think that this is where there needs to be a shift, and whistleblowers need to be called in, and contactees, people who are having face-to-face contact with extraterrestrials, people who have evidence of this, photos or any other evidence. There are people that do have evidence of their contacts, that they need to be called into these congressional hearings. And I think setting up a Select UAP committee is a step in the right direction. Okay, so here is something that I will talk about this. Well, let me bring this up now because I think it is very important. So this is the interview I did with Tim Cohen. It was released on Patreon first, and then on YouTube and on Rumble. So actually Rumble and Patreon is the only place where you can get, and Spotify, you can get the full video version of this, because on YouTube I had to do a self-censorship on that, because YouTube would likely give me a strike for discussing this idea of biblical prophecy and the Antichrist, and that King, the current monarch, reigning monarch of England, fulfills that role, or is that individual. I guess I need to be very careful in how you describe this individual. Now, in the interview, he gives his explanation for why King is the Antichrist, and very interesting biblical prophecy. Now, when I first talked to Tim Cohen, or had some discussions with him, I thought that idea was crazy. It just didn't make sense to me. I thought Charles was a progressive. He was someone that was on the right side of the environmental issue, and was also kind of like very interested in a range of issues that made this kind of idea unfathomable. But what has since happened is that there have been a number of others that have talked about the role Charles is playing when it comes to secret space programs. Two of those are JP. He is the military insider who's recently retired from the US Army, and he said that there were these seeds of life that were taken out of the United States and taken to who at the time had just been appointed king, even though he hadn't gone through the coronation yet. And there's also George Cavasilis, who says that he was told that a very dark spirit actually entered into. So more about that soon. Okay, now here what I say is that the role Britain has played in escalating the Ukraine conflict does, I think, support this idea that there is a very dark, demonic energy that has a very powerful role in the United Kingdom at the moment. I mean, right now in the United Kingdom, they are playing a dominant role, more so than the US, in escalating the Ukraine conflict and making sure that there's not a peaceful resolution of that. And in the UK, people are being suppressed for hate crimes. for just putting out social media posts criticizing public officials. So this is something that one has to be very careful of now. All right, so here is a very interesting story that I thought was worth pointing out, and that is that in October of this year, there was a decision by Keir Starmer, who is the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, to transfer ownership of the Chagos Islands from Britain to Mauritius. And that stemmed from adverse legal rulings by the International Court of Justice in 2019 and the United Nations General Assembly in 2021. And an agreement was reached with the Mauritian government. So, this is important because the military base, the US-UK military base, so it's a Navy base at Diego Garcia, will operate for the next 99 years under a new landlord. So what's happened is that this military base and what's underneath it essentially will now answer to or have Mauritius, the island, being responsible for it. And this is, I think, very significant because there have been several secret space program witnesses, Tony Rodriguez, Mark Domizio, both of them have commented about Diego Garcia having a large underground facility that hosts and supplies visiting secret space program dark fleet craft. So this has been happening for decades. Many abuses have been happening there. It's worth pointing out that Diego Garcia, up until the 1960s and 70s, had a native population there called Chagosians, and those Chagosians were expelled. And so now the fact that this agreement has been reached between Mauritius and the United Kingdom means that the Chagos Islands, which includes Diego Garcia, has now been returned to Mauritius, but that Diego Garcia itself will remain under the base there will remain under the control of the US and the UK for another 99 years, and the other outlying islands in the Chagos Islands, this is where the Chagosians can return. So I think, why was this done? I think, why did the UK government agree to this? I think the UK government, as I just mentioned, I think it is deeply part of the deep state tragedy, it is a tragedy, the deep state plan to maintain their operations for the next century. And I think that they've decided that it would be easier for them to do so through a military base at Diego Garcia that is really controlled by the Mauritians as opposed to the British. So maybe they see that in the future Britain is going to have some kind of revolt, revolution or something, where the British just throw off the shackles of the deep state. And, as I mentioned, thousands of people are in British jails for just expressing their views on social media. Meanwhile, there's a lot of crime that are being perpetuated by immigrants and criminal cartels and so forth. Okay, so here is an interview I did with Brad Olsen, and Brad presented some interesting new documents about the Antarctica bases that were established during the Second World War and soon afterwards, and also showed some passports, some instructions for Nazi submarines to reach the bases in Antarctica. There was base 211 in New Schwabenland, or Queen Maud Land as it's officially known, and also a new Berlin base in the vicinity of the South Pole. So he showed some documents that he had translated that are, I think, very compelling in terms of showing that the Germans established a presence in Antarctica during the war and maintained that presence after the war using an extensive fleet of U-boats. And of course that then afterwards there was a secret base established there under Antarctica at base 211 and also under the South Pole. So very interesting information there. Okay, so here is something that I thought was well worth looking at, and that is a statement by Bob Lazar, where he read briefing documents, and what he saw in the briefing documents are very interesting, because this is what he said about the briefing documents. It had information that, quote, "We're containers. That's supposedly how the aliens look at us, that we are nothing but containers, maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents, that religion was specifically created, so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers." Okay, well, that is very interesting. We are containers. So I think that is something that has been known to the secret space programs or to the deep state running these these UFO-related programs for decades. Now, Lazar says that he was given access to these briefing documents in 1988. So back in 1988, it was known that extraterrestrials view humans as physical containers for something. Now, whether it's the soul, whether it's consciousness, that is very significant. Now, why is that important? Well, I think this is important corroboration that exotic technology exists for transferring souls into different body containers, and that giants in stasis chambers can be activated by returning extraterrestrials. In other words, if you're an extraterrestrial civilization, you've created containers, physical bodies that can be used for hosting souls or consciousness. So grey extraterrestrials know about this, and they've been trying to create the perfect hybrid so that the grey consciousness can transfer into that hybrid and presumably take over the planet. And more about that soon. But also giants, that these giants that were once revered as gods because of their stature and the abilities that they had, that their containers, their physical bodies are in stasis chambers, and at the right time, those physical bodies or those containers would have a soul or consciousness transferred into it. So this is very, very interesting. And the secret government have been doing this for some time. I remember a individual that contacted me, and he told me about an incident where he says he got into trouble because he was dating a 14-year-old girl, and he was like an 18-year-old youth. And the problem for him was that the girl's father was a high-level official for the deep state in one of these secret programs. So he arranged for that 18-year-old young man to be abducted, taken into one of the programs, and then the consciousness from that young man was transferred into the body of a young girl. And And then you had the young girl's body, or young girl's consciousness, being transferred into the body of a dolphin, and the consciousness of the dolphin being transferred into the body of the young man. And he then contacted me and said, I am right. This is what happened to me. And he was recounting what happened to him as a young man, interested in this girl, and then he gets kidnapped. He goes through this technology, and now he's in the body of a 14-year-old girl. Well, I immediately took precautions because I thought, okay, I'm communicating here with a 14-year-old girl telling me that an 18-year-old male is residing in her body. So I said, well, first thing I want to do is you need to talk to my wife. And so I then got my wife involved so that I would be protected, because I thought maybe this is a trap. But I think that technology does exist. And I actually did have a kind of psychic probe into that incident, and it was like, yeah, that really did happen. All right, so here's something that was very, very interesting. So Elon Musk posted a picture. Here's the picture. So this is a picture of Elon Musk's bedside table. And, of course, you have a few things there, computer, some sort of handgun, and some sort of, I don't know if that's caffeinated or if that's alcohol. But here, this is the interesting thing right here. That is called a Vajra. Now, what in the world is a Vajra? Well, a Vajra is it's a limitless energy device or a weapon that's described in ancient Vedic texts. And so Musk was sending a message to the deep state, I think, through that picture, which is that we know these kinds of advanced technologies exist and that this information has been suppressed, but we are going to be releasing it. And so Musk is saying free energy systems exist and they're going to be released, and he knows that they've been suppressed. So I think this is a kind of a shot across the bow of the deep state saying, hey, I'm going to be using all my resources to release this advanced technology. I have the support of the Trump administration, so get ready. And remember what I said earlier about the Galactic Federation. They said that it was only when humanity's level of technological development reached a certain threshold that they would begin revealing themselves en masse. And so I think this is what is going to be happening during the Trump administration. Now, and I think this is very interesting because Elena Danaan, a contactee, and she has a lot of evidence supporting her contact cases. And there has been a website created that lists a lot of the evidence that Elena Danaan is a genuine contactee. And she says that she was taken onto an Anunnaki flagship, the Nibiru, and watched as Enki, or Ea, as that's his real name, Ea. Enki is a title that she saw him display a Vajra. And so here is Elena Danaan's picture of Enki, or Prince Ea, with the Vajra. This is the device Elon Musk had by his table. And so here you have the Vajra when it is fully activated. So it's kind of like that, in the Star Wars series, where you had those lasers that the Jedi Knights or the Sith Lords operated. So there was one that one of the Sith Lords had that had this kind of double-ended lightsaber, that double-ended, and that is a Vajra. So this is what Elon Musk has by the side of his table. So I think he was definitely sending a message. And Elena describes how the Vajra works, that it's a plasma weapon using crystals and kinetic force and consciousness, that all of those things interface. And it forms a double-sided weapon or hammer. Okay, so definitely, well, let's see, what else does she say here? She says that the 2D representations on ancient artifacts depict three prongs. In reality, it has four that are seen from profile, such as the trident spear weapons, how they are. Okay, so yes, she saw this weapon being demonstrated on the ship, on the Nibiru by Ia or Enki in 2022. And in her lecture in the Orlando GC conference in 2023, she described in detail the blueprints of these kinds of plasma weapons. So really quite a fascinating development there with Elon Musk showing the Vajra by his bedside table. Okay, so here is important corroboration for JP, and this concerns JP twice visiting a Nordic spaceport, a joint US-Nordic spaceport, and he described it as somewhere in the Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama area, and that he's been twice taken there, that he's gone through different entrances, and he described it as a mountain, and he described a portal out of the center of this mountain, which created a kind of stealth shield where craft could enter and leave from this underground base and go up into the atmosphere. So in my September of this year presentation at the Galactic Spiritual Informers Conference, I showed historical data that a deep underground military base had been secretly built under Green Mountain, which is close to Huntsville, Alabama. Now, Huntsville, Alabama is where the Marshall Space Flight Center is located. It's also where the Redstone Army Arsenal is, and this was where the Apollo mission was. That was an important facility for running the Apollo program in the 1960s and early 70s. So underneath Green Mountain, there is this underground facility that I described, and I showed some historical records showing that, yes, indeed, plans had been announced to build an underground base there, and then nothing else was announced. And that's kind of like the way in which a lot of these bases are often built. They get the funding, and then you don't hear anything more about the base, and people assume that the base or that facility wasn't built because they haven't heard from it anymore. But no, they got the money, and it just all became classified. Now, this is where there is this important corroboration, because there's a YouTube channel called Conflict Radio, and the host, his name is Michael, and he was initially skeptical that, because he lives near Green Mountain there in Alabama, and he was initially skeptical that there would be an underground base there. And so, you know, I presented some of the data to him, and so he thought, well, he'll check it out. And so he got Tony Rodriguez to do a double-blind remote viewing of Green Mountain, of what is underneath Green Mountain. So it was a double-blind, so Tony Rodriguez didn't know what the target was. He was just given alphanumeric, so Tony Rodriguez became the targeter. He was just given these coordinates by Michael, and then Tony passed it on to 3 remote viewers that he works with. Now, Tony Rodriguez, he actually is one of the most experienced remote viewers, or at least chronologically, he is one of the most experienced remote viewers on the planet, because he began remote viewing as a trained operative in 1981 when he was taken to a facility at China Lake called Inyokern, where he was trained by let's just say a senior figure within the creation of the remote viewing program. And he created, and that figure was there training remote viewers that had been secretly transferred to this Inyokern facility. And Tony Rodriguez was 10 years old at the time, and they were experimenting with children. Which is why that was done secretly. And so Tony Rodriguez has been doing remote viewing since 1981. So that's 40 years now. And so he does understand the principles and has experience as an operational remote viewer. And so the three remote viewers reported back, and they saw an underground military facility under Green Mountain with multiple spacecraft, a spaceport, portals, etc. So this was a very important corroboration for JP that there is a spaceport run by Nordics and the US military there in that region of Alabama, very close to Huntsville, the Huntsville base. Okay, so here is another remote viewing session. This one, again, was conducted by Tony Rodriguez. And this was more of an informal one where Tony just got one remote viewer to look into the Nazca Desert of Peru because Jean Charles Moyen, the French contactee and super soldier, I guess you would call him a super soldier, maybe not. Oh, yes, he served as a super soldier, that he had teleported to a space ark under the Nazca Desert of Peru. Now, that's significant because Jean Charles has previously reported that he was taken to a space ark under Mount Fuji in Japan, that he was taken to a space ark under Mauna Kea in Hawaii, that he was also taken to a space ark in Egypt under the Sphinx there. And that was very interesting because that incident was witnessed by Elena Danaan, the experience in Egypt, and also the Mount Fuji, where Elena was also taken there. And so she witnessed JP teleporting there because while Elena can be teleported or transported by the Galactic Federation to these different locations, Jean Charles Moyen, he has the ability to teleport there himself. So she has said that she was to be a witness to that. So Jean Charles has been taken to different areas where he has seen these space arks under mountains or under remote conditions, and also under the Atlantic Ocean. That's another place where he says he saw a space ark or ships, 3 ships. He described 3 ships under the Atlantic Ocean, close to a space ark. So here, Jean Charles says he saw a space ark underneath Nazca Desert of Peru. So Tony Rodriguez, he organized a remote viewing session, and the remote viewer corroborated that there was an object there under Peru, that there was some kind of spacecraft there. So very significant. So you can go to Jean Charles' website, Jean Charles Moyen. So he does have a website. It's just Jean Charles hyphenated between his first name and middle name, and then Moyen. If you go to his website, you can check out this remote viewing that Tony Rodriguez conducted with a remote viewer, Veronica, where they remote viewed what Jean Charles says he witnessed under the Nazca Desert after teleporting there. So more corroboration for Jean Charles. So congratulations to him for that very important corroboration. So here's a very interesting story that concerns UFOs appearing near or over sensitive military facilities. In this particular incident, here's this is the poster, Marik VR, and he describes by displaying bright flashing lights an unknown actor be it terrestrial or non-human intelligence, so the UFO is appearing near a military installation, is putting on a remarkably brazen, years-long display of impunity. Okay, so here they describe 2019 Southern California, months long, 100 miles offshore. So this is affecting the US Navy, where they have these UFOs kind of intervening or appearing during military exercises. Great 2019, 2020, great planes, 30 to 50 UAPs, no sound, motherships. So great planes, this is where there's a lot of nuclear missile silos that the United States has. Langley Air Force Base, a major site for the Air Force and for training operatives there in Virginia, and similarly in the United Kingdom. Again, another sensitive military facility where these UFOs appear. Now, and here you have some images showing these UFOs appearing there. But, what I wanted to draw your attention to was that the way this is being framed, it's like, okay, so now the framing of these UFOs that are appearing near military installations, appearing brazenly and displaying impunity, the languaging there really justifies them being portrayed as a national security threat by the legacy media. That's what's happening. Now, this is despite multiple witness testimonies that US corporations have successfully built and deployed ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, for secret space program customers. This is a very important point here, because with Luis Elizondo, when he has come out and he has done several interviews, and he says absolutely these UFOs are not US military or corporate craft, and that is not correct. I know of multiple witnesses and whistleblowers that have identified these UFOs, many of them as actually being alien reproduction vehicles that had been built by Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and so forth. One witness or one credible source was a former aerospace patent illustrator, Mark McCandlish, and he reported on what a witness, that is Brad Sorensen, who saw a flying saucer demo in the 1980s at Norton and Edwards Air Force Base. That actually, there's a little confusion as to whether it was Norton or Edwards. Actually, according to Mark McCandlish's later testimony, it actually happened at Edwards Air Force Base, and that there was a large hangar, and there were 3 differently sized flying saucer craft that were being exhibited for customers. So in the 1980s, the manufacturers of these reverse engineered flying saucers, and that was the Mark McCandlish's opinion, was that it was Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works that had built these, that these were displaying these flying saucer craft for different customers: Air Force, NRO, US Navy, CIA. These were the customers for these crafts. The CIA say, "Oh yeah, I want 3 of those." The Navy says, "Oh well, if you put this on that, we'll take 10." And so that's the purpose of an air show, so that the Lockheed Martin would build a limited number of these for select customers. And JP, the Army witness that I've been working with since 2008, he's been taken on several of these reverse engineered craft. So these craft have been reverse engineered, and they are operational. So when you have people, whether it's Luis Elizondo, whether it is David Grush, whether it is anyone, I think Michael Schellenberger has also said he's consulted 40 or 30 witnesses. It sounds impressive. You've consulted 30 or 40 witnesses that say that, oh yeah, the corporations have these crafts in their laboratories, and they're studying these craft, but no, they haven't been able to reverse engineer these. The technology is too advanced. So it sounds impressive when David Grush and Michael Schellenberger cite 30 or 40 witnesses that are prepared to come forward and talk about these. But we know from the databases that people like Stephen Greer have been able to accumulate that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals that know of these alien reproduction vehicles, that these craft have been successfully reverse engineered, that secret space programs do exist. So that means that we need to reassess these kinds of claims when UFOs are seen near military facilities, that they're behaving brazenly or impunity, and that this is a national security threat. Because how do we know that they are non-human intelligence? Could they be actually some of these reverse engineered craft? How do we know they're a threat? I mean, what we are seeing here is, I think, a limited hangout where they are revealing some of the truth, but not all of it. That yes, there are UFOs near military facilities, but I think it's wrong to say that they are just something that are related to non-human, or that they're not related to any government military program or corporate program, that they are related to NHI. That I think there is a lot of evidence, whistleblower, credible evidence, that many UFOs are actually reverse engineered spacecraft. All right, so here is me coming back to this story with Tim Cohen. And, I thought this was very interesting. This portrait of King Charles, the official portrait of King Charles, this is another element, I think, that really does give credence to what Tim Cohen is saying. Now, Tim Cohen, he was a former US Air Force cadet. He got out 6 months before graduating because he had a life-changing experience where he was essentially told that he would be working on biblical prophecy. So, I mean, that's the experience he had. And he wrote and he began working on the whole Antichrist thing, which is very interesting. What does that mean today in this modern world? I think what we have is this kind of portrait, this official portrait involving King Charles, that people have reversed the image and put them together. So if you get the portrait on one side and then you reverse it and put it on the other side and you put it together, in the middle you see a figure that people have identified as the demon Baphomet. And I mentioned this very dark spirit entering into King Charles, and that was according to George Cavassalis. So I suspect that what he saw was this being Baphomet. So, this kind of is consistent with what Tim Cohen has been saying for a couple of decades now. I think his book, The Antichrist and a Cup of Tea, came out in the 1990s, and where he made this prophecy, made this prediction, and no one believed him at the time. I certainly didn't. But recent events have occurred that, in my mind, give credence to this. And I think the fact that you got the British trying to escalate the Ukraine conflict into a world war, I think, well, why are they doing that? I think this gives us an explanation. All right, well, here is Miriam Delicado. She is doing a 3-part webinar series starting on December 8. UAP Secrets, What Are They Hiding? So this is, I think, well worth taking a look at. UAP Secrets, What Are They Hiding? Miriam, she had contacts with these tall blondes in 1988. They gave her a lot of information about the future, about disclosure, and she's going to be doing this 3-part series on December 8, January 12 and February 16. So this is, I think this is a great way to get informed on what is coming, learn more about Miriam's contacts, and this is a great way to support her as she continues to do this work, this disclosure work. So you can find her site. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, just go to star.blueprophecy.com and you'll see this webinar series posted there. Okay, so here is, I thought, something that's very, very interesting. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is play you a short video clip where Ross Coulthart talks about Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump Jr. both expressing an interest in whistleblower claims of secret UFO crash retrieval programs. So let me play this video extract. It only goes for 1.5 minutes. So let me start from the beginning. Here we go.
There's going to be a pushback against Trump if he does try to do this. There's two big items on his plate. Will he declassify the JFK archives? We're going to hold him to that promise because he's explicitly promised that. And will he investigate the UAP issue? Yes, he said he will. We'll hold him to that promise as well. Will he do it? Now, that's a big question. I think there's momentum there. You've got Vivek Ramaswamy, who I know he's in the efficiency government audit area with Elon Musk, but he's going to be ruthless in chasing down allegations that there is a secret retrieval program spending billions of taxpayer dollars that are not accountable to the US public. I think that's a crucially important first point. Then you've got RFK. Don't forget RFK. I know he's covering Big Pharma in his portfolio, but he's going to be a hugely influential voice in the Trump cabinet. And Trump himself has got Don Trump Jr., who I know because he's interviewed David Grush, he's interviewed Lou Elizondo. He's taken a very personal interest in the UAP subject. I guess it all hangs on whether Donald Trump has a spine. Will he show courage and take on the national security establishment? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a political leader being willing to take on an establishment that I strongly suspect was involved in the murder of JFK.
All right, so there you have Ross Coulthart talking about Vivek Ramaswamy, as well as Robert Kennedy Jr., and also Donald Trump Jr. being very interested in these stories, in these claims of reverse engineering of crashed UFO craft, and that government money is being funneled to fund all of that without Congress and the general public being aware. So I think this is where you get into the whole need to know. I mean, surely Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, for that matter, as the individuals that have been tasked to head up this Department of Government efficiency, I think Vivek is going to be the one that really runs that. He has a need to know. I mean, where is that money going? Is it going to fund this UFO crash retrieval program? And so, yeah, that will be very, very interesting to see how much he learns and how much is disclosed to the public. And the fact that Donald Trump Jr. is also interested in that, that is no surprise to me, because I think Donald Trump Sr., as I mentioned at the very beginning, was given a briefing by the Galactic, or was working with the Galactic Federation of Worlds to promote disclosure. So I think we are going to have a very exciting second Trump administration when it comes to disclosure. Okay, so here's another very interesting story about the secrecy system, and this concerns Representative Nancy Mace, where she was cited in a news article by the Washington Times where she said, are they keeping the President of the United States in the dark? And that's very interesting because Nancy Mace, she was the chairwoman of the subcommittee in the House Oversight Committee hearing that was held earlier this month, and she is now of the opinion that they are keeping the president in the dark on this issue. And she is spot on, because a key mechanism in the UFO secrecy system was keeping US presidents out of the loop. And this began under President Eisenhower, who had to threaten to invade Area 51 or the S4 facility there to get full access to the programs that were occurring there. And President Kennedy, he tried unsuccessfully to get access to these programs, to force CIA, the MJ-12, to disclose these classified UFO files. And we know what happened to President Kennedy. So since then, no president has had full access, aside from President Herbert Walker Bush Sr., and that was because he was a former CIA director, a CIA operative, and he was also involved in the JFK hit. So that's very interesting that members of Congress are now saying that, well, not only are we being kept in the dark, that the intelligence community, the Pentagon, are keeping us, members of Congress, in the dark, but we suspect that you're also keeping the president in the dark concerning this. And that is absolutely correct. So it's good to see members of Congress identifying that. Okay, so Jeremy Corbell, who has been working with George Knapp and very prominent in these recent UFO congressional hearings and getting people like David Grush out there and Admiral Tim Gallaudet and several other witnesses to come forward. So yeah, that's been very helpful. He put out two facts that I think are well worth taking a look at. One was this song concerning Sawana black holes. So this is very interesting. Okay, so I won't play it just because of the copyright issues. Yeah, so I don't want to play the whole thing because I'll get a copyright strike. But yeah, it is definitely well worth listening to that song by this singer Savannah Havranek, and she performed Black Hole. So I guess you would just do a Google search in YouTube. Over there it is, Black Holes, and you'll see this her performing Black Holes. And yeah, very entertaining, well done. And this is where we get into this other matter. Now, Bob Lazar told you like it is when it comes to seeing 9 extraterrestrial flying saucer craft at Area 51. I mean, that's what Bob Lazar has said. Now, the thing is, that is actually not correct. There were 9 flying saucer craft that were seen at S4 at the S4 facility, but 4 of them were actually real and huntable Nazi craft. And these were first taken to Wright Field in Operation Lusty in 1945. Now, where does this information come from? I mean, Bob Lazar, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, many others see Bob Lazar as really a very credible witness. And I think he is a credible witness. I think he described very accurately exactly what he saw at S4. He saw 9 flying saucer craft. And he has stated that he was told or believes that these are all extraterrestrial spacecraft. While there are 2 other witnesses that actually say, no, that's not correct. One is a former Navy SEAL that was recruited by the CIA as an assassin, and he was taken to Area 51 to guard the S4 facility between assignments. And his name was Derek Hennessy, also known as Connor O'Ryan. And he actually was interviewed by a legendary researcher, Colonel Wendell Stevens. And so on tape, you see this witness say that 4 of the 9 craft at the S4 facility at Area 51 were Nazi flying saucer craft. And this matches with historical records that shows that under Operation Lusty, the US Army Air Force and the Navy transported some of the flying saucer craft that had been recovered at places such as the Skoda Skunk Works, or the Skoda Steelworks, and also in a top secret facility in Poland, that these flying saucer prototypes were taken to Wright-Patterson, or as it was called at the time, Wright Airfield, and then it became Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And eventually, when Area 51 was set up in the mid-1950s, it was taken to Area 50. These craft were taken to Area 51 for storage. And there's a second witness. Another witness is this individual, this whistleblower called Cooper or Stein, who Linda Moulton Howe and also Richard Dolan also got to interview. And what he says, what he described was that Area 51, the first 2 craft we saw looked almost identical. They were smaller, not nearly as big as the one in the back. So he says that, and he says at that time, so this was in the 1950s, remember? So this was in the 1950s, there were 7 craft at this S4 facility at Area 51. And he said the Colonel Jim, who was the US Air Force guide at this facility, giving this Cooper and a senior CIA official a tour, that they were told that they were Vril craft. So there were 2 Vril craft. These are the original prototype flying saucer craft that were developed by Maria Orsic in the 1920s after she channeled these beings from Aldebaran. And she channeled the information in Sumerian. It was Sumerian texts, and so it was all translated, and then they were built. And then he goes on to say, then there were another 3 craft, but these were alien craft, and that there were another 2 craft in the back, another 3 craft in the back, and these were the German Hannibal. This was the 2 of these craft were Hannibal craft. These were the bigger craft that the Germans or the Nazis had developed for use in the war effort and for interplanetary travel. And so that gives us a second witness. So there are 2 other witnesses. It's not just Bob Lazar who's been at S4. There are 2 other witnesses, Derek Hennessy and Cooper, and both of them say that 4 of the craft, of those 9 craft that Bob Lazar saw at Area 51 at S4, are actually Nazi prototype flying saucer craft that the Nazis had reverse engineered based on what information they had available. So, you have to think of this logically, because, I mean, this is where I strongly disagree with George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, David Grush, and Timothy Gallaudet, and also Michael Schellenberger, and others that say that, well, these craft have been reverse engineered. Sorry, these craft have been retrieved from crashes all over the United States, going all the way back to the 40s, even the 1930s, that these had been retrieved. And that these craft that had been retrieved, the corporations are studying them, but the technology is just too advanced. We haven't been able to reverse engineer it yet. Well, I mean, that's just bullshit. Sorry, you just have. These people that are supporting that idea, I mean, there is something drastically wrong with them. Sorry, but if Nazi Germany in the 1930s, in a time when computers were in their infancy, could reverse engineer flying saucer craft, and that they took the operational ones with them to Antarctica, and they left behind some of the prototypes that they had no more use for. In the 1940s, they did that. And you're saying that this technology has been in the possession of the US military and corporations since the 1940s. And so now, 80 years later, it's like, oh, we still haven't been able to successfully reverse engineer those. And people like Lou Elizondo say that, well, none of the craft that we're seeing up there are American or have been built by us at all, so they must be NHI or crypto-terrestrials or something, right? It's like that is a limited hangout. That is what it is. And it's a shame that people like Stephen Greer and myself and others who are aware of this deeper history are not being brought into kind of like talk about this, that because I think this limited hangout is being sold. And why are they doing that? They want us to believe that the UFOs up there are just NHI or extraterrestrial or crypto-terrestrial or interdimensional, however they want to frame it, because I think the goal is to do some kind of false flag event. All right, so that I think covers that particular story. Okay, here is a story about the 5 UFOs that were recently filmed flying over Washington, D.C.'s no-fly zone. So there were these 5 UFOs that were seen flying over the Washington, D.C. area. So there you have 4 of them, and a 5th one came into the picture at a certain point. So it's a video. Here we are, another photo, still shot of them. So very interesting that this story gets highlighted. Here's another picture, a couple of pictures showing these lights over Washington, D.C. So this is where we get into what is the motivation here? Why are they doing this? Well, I think what's happening here is that there is a process of shaping public opinion that these UFOs that are seen flying over military facilities, sensitive military facilities, that are now flying over Washington, D.C., over the Capitol, that they're not our craft, so they must be NHI or crypto-terrestrial or interdimensional or something, or maybe a foreign adversary that's got this kind of technology, so they are a threat. And I think this is, again, it's all building up this narrative that UFOs are a threat. So that is it for this particular week in review. Now, I do want to announce that on December 7, I will be holding my next monthly briefing document. And so you can register for that by going to my website, exopolitics.org, and you can register for that through Crowdcast directly, or if you want to get a deal, then become a monthly Patreon subscriber, and essentially you get a quarter off, 25% off, and you get the benefit of being able to see all of the previous monthly briefings. So my next monthly briefing will be on December 7 at 2 p.m. So I hope you can join me for that. So thank you for watching this week in review, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.